rivers turn to stone. We keep reaping what we've sown. And those who suffer most are those who've been exposed to our hunger and our greed. 'Cause we take more than we need. Will we see the damage done? For it's burned under the sun. And all the things we throw away, will they end up in another place? It's building up, burning down our forests to the ground. Oh, this world is on fire, fire. And though we can't go back, we can get on track to make things better. We need your voices now to speak up loud, 'cause this world is on fire, fire, Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say as well, we do have a music video for this song that me and Jana worked on. Fortunately, it can't be played tonight, but if you go on my social media pages, Sadie Marie Music, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, the music video is on that, and it involves some of the women here as well tonight, so you should go and check that out if you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo! Thank you so much, Amanda. That was very powerful. So, this is how the rest of the evening is going to pan out. Each speaker will speak for 5 minutes. We'll have 3 speakers and then a short Climate Sisters film and a poem. And then we'll have 2 more speakers. Then we'll have a panel discussion, and then it'll be open to you on the floor or via Zoom to ask questions. We'll have a roving mic here. So let me introduce you straight away to the panel. So we start on the right with KAVITA NAIDU. KAVITA is an international human rights lawyer from Fiji, Australia, who specializes in feminist climate justice for grassroots Asian Pacific women, and she has over 15 years experience in the field. She's also on the board of Greenpeace Australia Pacific, and she's a team member, co-focal team member of the Women and Gender constituency for the UNFCCC. This is an area that is full. This is like acronym hell. There are so many abbreviations here. But
Agreed.
The UNFCCC is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the different constituencies have observer status. Is that right? So you're part of that. Then to my right is Dr. SHERILYN MacGregor, reader in environmental politics at the University of Manchester. SHERILYN's written widely on the relationship between feminism and environmental politics and intersectional feminism. And she edited the indispensable Routledge Handbook of Gender and the Environment that was published in 2017. On my left is ZARINA AHMAD. ZARINA is a climate change environmentalist who's challenging the idea the crazy idea that ethnic minorities aren't interested in the climate crisis. And she's helping to create pathways for underrepresented groups to work in environmental organizations. She's also doing a PhD on sustainable behavior in BAME communities. Next to her is SASCHA GABIZON. SASCHA is Executive Director of the WECF, which is Women Engaged for a Common Future. And this is an international network of over 150 women's and civil society organizations running projects in over 50 countries. SASCHA's expertise is in gender equality and climate justice and feminist solutions to climate waste and environmental health. And we're also very much hoping, fingers crossed, that we will be joined by Dominique Palmer, a youth climate justice activist who's an organizer for Fridays for the Future International, for the UK Student Climate Network, and launch coordinator of a really interesting group, Climate Live, that tries to engage new groups of people into the climate movement through music. She's also a student of politics and international relations, goodness knows when, in her spare time, if she has any, at the University of Birmingham. So we hope that she'll be joining us. Okay, so that's me done. I should tell the speakers that I'm a rather unforgiving chair, so 5 minutes does mean 5 minutes, and you'll see me wave manically my cards if you go over
my head.
But so the question you're answering is, why do we need a feminist approach to tackling the climate crisis? And over to you, Kavita.
Thank you. A very good evening to all of you. As the Prime Minister of Estonia, one of the very few female leaders we have here, Ms. Kallas said on Monday, the climate crisis is not gender neutral. Let me share with you what this looks like from Oxfam's 2020 report, Time to Care. The 22 richest men in the world have more wealth than all the women in Africa. Women and girls put in 12.5 billion hours of unpaid work each and every day, a contribution to the global economy of at least 10.8 trillion a year, more than 3 times the size of the global tech industry, getting the richest 1% to pay just 0.5% extra tax on their wealth over the next 10 years would equal the investment needed to create 117 million jobs in sectors such as elderly care, childcare, education and health. Oxfam India's CEO said women and girls are among those who benefit least from today's economic system. They spend billions of hours cooking, cleaning, and caring for children and the elderly. Unpaid care work is the hidden engine that keeps the wheels of our economies, businesses, and societies moving. It is driven by women who often have little time to get an education, earn a decent living, or have a say in how our societies are run, and who are therefore trapped at the bottom of the economy. Today, we are facing the worst economic, climate, and health crisis in our living memory. Rising poverty, hunger, loss of jobs and livelihoods, epidemic levels of sexual and gender-based violence across the world, the rise of far-right populism and weakening democracies, deepening toxic fundamentalisms from controlling women's autonomy to hatred, to climate change denialism, to Islamophobia and anti-immigration rhetoric is rife. Tech industries are colluding with governments, military and police to target activists, control media, and surveil with impunity. There is an exponential rise in attacks against women environment defenders, land grabbing, deforestation and agribusiness, illegal logging and fishing have resulted in mass displacements, competition and conflict over fast diminishing resources, leading to greater levels of environment degradation, biodiversity loss, pollution and waste. This is all happening because of a patriarchal, colonial, white supremacist and neoliberal world order that continues to push us into compounding crises. Our social, political, legal and economic systems are broken, and trying to find solutions within a system that is deliberately designed to benefit the elite and subjugate us cannot stand. One way that we have chosen to challenge this system is to mobilize grassroots women from the global south to advocate for an alternative development model that we call a feminist fossil fuel-free future that centers new gender-just economic, political, and social relationships in a world free from climate change. Do I still have time?
You've got plenty of time.
Okay.
At least a minute.
The 5 Fs, as we call it in short, campaigns for a just and equitable transition that challenges the gender division of labor, promotes energy democracy and agroecological farming practices, invests in the commons, provides a social wage, demands the dismantling of all trade rules within and outside the WTO that prevent climate action, establishes a global tax body that ends tax competition and evasion, secures innovative sources of public finance to redistribute wealth, and ensures gender equitable participatory democracy. We use feminist participatory action research, or FPAR, as a feminist political tool in enhancing grassroots women activism through capacity building, producing new knowledge, tools, and resources to collectively document lived experiences of climate change and strengthen grassroots women's movements to demand feminist climate justice. Feminist movements globally have heeded the need for a complete overhaul of our systems and build a community that is gender just, equitable, sustainable, regenerative, care-based, community-owned, and include the voices of marginalized peoples and be grounded in indigenous and traditional knowledge and protect human rights. Thank you.
Oh, right, thanks.
Don't mind the young girls. Don't mind them.
Thank you for that perfect timekeeping as well. Set a high bar. Sherilyn.
Yes, it's a very high bar. Oh, well, thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here. And thank you to everyone who's been involved in organizing the event. Such a lot of work has been put in for the last, I think, 2 years. We've been talking about this event. I think I've managed to distill 3 answers to the question. But before I get to them, I just want to say that as a full-time academic, I'd really like to acknowledge and give a bit of a shout out to all the researchers and scholars around the world who've been researching in this field for decades and offering really important critiques and visions. And I'm sure that most feminist academics who work on climate justice would agree that we do this work in solidarity with activists while also being mindful of our positions of privilege, and that we have a lot to learn from activists and all those who are on the front lines of the climate emergency. So my 3 points to answer the question are based on work that I've been doing in the last couple of years. Anne mentioned that I worked on the feminist Green New Deal for the UK document with Maeve Cohen, which was sponsored by WEN and the Women's Budget Group. Another thing I've done recently is co-author a report commissioned by Oxfam America called Caring in a Changing Climate, Centering Care Work in Climate Action, and that's co-authored with Seema Aurora Johnson and Maeve Cohen. And both of those pieces of research really have allowed me to think a lot about what it means to come up with sort of policy recommendations for really trying to provide alternatives, like feminist alternatives for addressing the climate crisis. And both of those pieces of work were also really influenced by the pioneering work of the feminist Green New Deal coalition work from the US, based in the US, but a global effort. And there's many people probably tuning in from around the world who've been involved in that coalition. And that's such an important, they were the pioneers and need to have credit for that work. Okay, why do we need a feminist approach to the climate crisis? First, existing mainstream approaches aren't working and won't work because they do not challenge entrenched and institutionalized narratives and norms that sustain the system. And so the racialized, heteropatriarchal capitalist system. We know government approaches are terrible, but there are also some shortcomings and problems in the plans and visions that are coming out of the left and the green and the progressive side of things. So feminists need to keep challenging and proposing alternatives as well. So that was one of the things that, that was sort of where Maeve and I started when we were trying to think about what a feminist Green New Deal would look like. We looked at existing versions of the Green New Deal in the UK and found them to have as Anne said earlier, very little attention to gender inequalities, very little attention to intersectional forms of injustice. So often very elite, not very democratically developed. They're very narrow in terms of centering issues to do with energy transition, technological solutions to the climate crisis. For example, focusing on jobs in the energy sector, which we know will predominantly be jobs for white men and profits for white men. So that's one of the main reasons is we need to constantly think about what types of feminist alternatives there are to, even on the left, what kinds of what kinds of green deals are coming forward. Second reason, we need feminist approaches because feminism is the only movement that puts care work at the center and has concrete ideas for tackling the climate crisis and the care crisis in an integrated way. They are interlocking crises and they have to be addressed together, and no other approach does this in a serious and sustained way. So what does this look like? In the feminist Green New Deal, there's lots of concrete solutions for how we can center care work by investing in care work, by thinking about thinking about infrastructure, care infrastructure, to ensure that care work is embedded in society. It's the foundation of the economy. It's the foundation for our societies and for any kind of green recovery or building back better. In our Oxfam report, we go into even more concrete a set of recommendations for what a sort of gender-just and care-sensitive climate action would look like. And we use the 5R framework, which is a really important feminist framework for thinking about tackling care work inequalities that was sort of building upon work by Diane Elson and others who have an association with the Women's Budget Group. And this is a 5R framework that has been used by the ILO, by Oxfam, by many other organizations around the world. So what does this mean? So the 5Rs are, first of all, recognize care work. Recognize and value care work as a foundation to a decarbonized climate-just society. Recognize and value the role of carers and the work they do to enable households to cope in crisis and disaster situations and with everyday environmental stresses. Recognize and value the knowledge that comes from environmental care work to do climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience types of work. That's recognize. Second R is reduce. Reduce care work. How do we reduce care work in a way that's also about climate mitigation and adaptation? Provide labor-saving domestic and agricultural technologies that simultaneously mitigate and adapt to climate change and reduce the time and effort required to carry out daily care work tasks. Also, we can think about increasing access to climate information services that make it easier for carers to anticipate and plan for climate events in order to minimize the negative effects on households. That's the second R. Third R is redistribute care work. And how do we do that? Well, we would embed state-provided care services like childcare, elder care, in national and international climate policies. This is again about care infrastructure. Promote, and this is also really important, it's not just about the government, promoting and facilitating equal responsibility for and hands-on delivery of care among men, boys, women, and girls. Make care a common responsibility that no one gets a pass out of.
Finally, we war terrorists, including funding, training,
be difficult to get on, and it's still very hard to get your voices heard. Most often, we are represented by others. Others talk on behalf of us, and usually it's men that do that job. So that leads me to, what does it feel like, or how do we get invisible women? So I come across lots of invisible women, and I'm always fascinated at how a woman of color in a room, quite often of white people, becomes invisible. So I'm here today with the Climate Sisters, and talking to the Climate Sisters has been a huge learning curve, a huge journey. It's been absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to use two of the Climate Sisters' stories that they've told me. So one of them is KAVITA, who's actually going to be up here, and we're going to and she's got a voice today, right? But I'm going to tell you what she said to me. She said to me, ZARINA, it's okay for you to go out there and talk about all these issues, but me, I'm a refugee. If I see anything, I'm scared. I'm scared that somebody will say to me, don't rock the boat, don't say anything, we will throw you out of the country. I won't have a house. I won't have a home. So KAVITA says, I can't use my voice. I'm invisible. Then there's Saj. Saj's over here today as well. So I was speaking to Saj, and Saj says to me, she's a first generation from a migrant family, but her parents always had this fear that they were going to be sent back home. So she was told, don't say anything. Don't use your voice. Keep quiet. Don't rock the boat. Don't challenge anybody. So Saj hasn't been allowed to use her voice. So she becomes invisible. Right. Then there's me, who's got a big voice, and I talk a lot, right? So, yeah, but I have a voice and I use it, but there's still many times that I'm ignored and not heard, and I become invisible. Right? So for me, this is where we really need to stand together as women, as sisters, and actually come together, supporting one another, working together, rather than competing with each other, is really to show strength and harmony and love and nurture, all those things, all those traits that are actually classified as weaknesses, they're actually our strength. So we should play to our strength. So I'm going to talk about the Climate Sisters now, which is a wonderful project. We've got a short video to tell us, a wee trailer video about what the Climate Sisters are doing, what it's about, but I just want to put a little bit of context about how the Climate Sisters came together. So there was a group of women during COVID that went on a climate leadership course that I run. Now, at the end of that course, they were to produce a presentation. The presentation was a 2D presentation, but the ideas, their opinions, and their views on the climate crisis actually made a huge impact on me, to the point where I looked at it and I thought, I can't walk away from this. We need to do something. And this is where WEN comes in. So WEN and I put together a funding application to see, well, how can we take it forward? And we managed to get some funding, and this is today, if you go around and you listen to the women and see their projects, it's all come alive, all these 3D projects that they've all been doing, and it's been really well supported. We've had a lot of support, and we couldn't have done it without support. And again, this is where it's really important that we actually do start supporting one another. So I'm going to show the video now.
Yeah.
So using the different mediums of art and being creative has actually given these women a voice. And with one of those women today, we've got KAVITA, who's going to come on stage, right? And this is KAVITA, who's... who's been scared to use her voice, so it's really good that she's in a safe space today to say what she wants to say.
I'd like to thank ZARINA for her supporting for us in this project and for her leading us to this group. And thanks for her so much, and thanks for my Aldi, also my supporter, who helped me for my design, and she was very helpful for me in my writing. Thanks for her. Hello, my name is Kabat Mala Rashid, and this is my poem, من خلال أزهاري, through my flowers. Through my flowers, beautiful words written on my sun, saying, now's the time. Here I can see you far away, giving me your heart and soul around mountains and seas. This dedication amounts to Qurbani, to stay together, looking to skies no longer clear, drawing a climate change in us. Change in us. Don't let this go unseen with golden words. It is greeting nature, your signature, please. To make our love behind imagination, dancing under the rain, beginning the story of you and me. They told me in my country, please don't cut the tree. Tell them don't throw plastic, broken glasses on the ground. Our mothers warning, don't haste the time. Discover me for all one's wars. Enough wars on the land. They drop destruction on the earth and carry the dress of death. You smile when it rains, but when it floods, you disappear. You smile when it rains, but when it floods, you disappear. Where do you stand? Where do you stand? This is our choice. We can plant the seed. As leaves on the winds, as leaves on the wind's wing, dreams and rhythm try to be. Between the shadow, settle your words here, and bucket of a flower for me. As for the sea waves, my feelings will never compare. All best things happen at sea. It happens to everyone here. This devotion I feel washing over me. Qurbani. As it happened, the sadness overwhelms me at the heart of my sentence. I think, how can it be? But like a hug of wrapping waves that pain will heal, so we can feel free. Beautiful eyes I can see through and be free. With a crown of hope, I see a mirror reflecting the past and beautiful dreams. Like a picture is worth thousands of words and an ending stream. Remember, your love has taught me the absence of fears. We can plant the flower seed. It is your mother nature holding you in adoration, asking to live better, touching your face with love through all seasons, and always shining in spring. Through climate change, I can hear warm welcome, voiced like the light. من لدى الزينة, it shakes me, إنها تهزني. 3 language, I say the word. And there is another paragraph in Arabic. توأمان نحن أنا وأنت والزمن المسافر وبيننا قارب من المسافات يحترق. قد لا أجد هنالك غير الشواطئ والشجر الأخضر، لكنني سأقول أن حبي لك أيتها الطبيعة كالبرق تحت لهيب المطر. Thank you for all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you so much for that, Kabat. Thank you. Sasha.
Thank you. This is too impressive, and I have no poem I can read to you. Thank you so much for your feelings and your art. I'm with Women Engaged for a Common Future. We are an eco-feminist network. We did an eco-feminist scorecard for the German elections, and we got a lot of hate mail by white old men saying that all of this was completely ridiculous. And when we go to the negotiations here at the COP, and we insist that we should have our sisters from the Global South speaking their voices, their priorities, their demands, it's very difficult. This was a very unequal COP. We had many of our Global South sisters who could not come because of vaccine inequalities, and we have to bring them in via Skype or Zoom, but of course we cannot have the same impact on the decision makers. And we are here to try and create eco-feminist, green, climate policy, but what we see mostly is business as usual, greenwashing of net zero solutions by big corporations, and unfortunately also countries who say that they are green and feminist. Today we gave the fossil of the day to France, because France is trying to get nuclear energy and gas into the subsidy systems of the European Union and of the global climate change funding. And so it is, we are facing this very patriarchal, exploitative economic system, which is being perpetuated by, or they are trying to perpetuate this under a green screen. And what we did for Europe, because we have offices in, I'm from Holland, we have offices in Holland, Germany and France. We worked with colleagues also, including from WEN, on the Eco-Feminist Green Deal report, and I will be presenting that also next week at the European Pavilion. And there we are saying indeed that we need a radical change of our economy, and that the European Green Deal sounded very good at the beginning, but it was completely gender blind. It had no reference to gender justice or intersectional justice. And so we've been working on some studies with colleagues from Spain, for example, where we found that we see already now really strong gender gaps in, for example, the mounting energy poverty. Yeah, with increasing energy prices, the first households to be cut off the energy, electricity, are women-led households. But you have to look at it from an intersectional perspective, because many of them are women with a migrant background, or women who are elderly or disabled. And they have indeed been the most impacted by the by the energy price increase. But at the same time, with the energy crisis comes also a lack of support to then try and join the energy transition to a green energy solution. So that is one of the big issues we have to address. We have, I know, unfortunately, you are no longer with us, but we have to address things like the Renewable Energy Directive of the European Union, and we have to make that a gender-just energy directive. We have, and that is one of the big areas, of course, and we are looking at prosumer solutions, creating democratically run, with women leaderships, renewable energy cooperatives. That is really what we see as a core part of an eco-feminist Green Deal for the energy sector. What we also need is a change of the transportation sector. And Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson are flying back 40 kilometers, or I don't know, 300 kilometers with private jets, going back from the COP, and it's such a horrible example, of course, and so the opposite of what we need. What we need is green, carbon-free public transport. I was very pleased to see that you already have a lot of quite green buses driving around Glasgow, and that you have free travel for people with disabilities and elderly. And of course, that has to be the core of the transport transition. But of course, we would want to see free public transport as really the main aim. But where do you get the money from? Well, the money has to come from there where we spend most of it. So in the EU, we still have almost 50% of our subsidies going to the industrialized agricultural complex, which is not only harming our health and our environment, but also especially those of our sisters in the Global South. We know that we are causing a lot of deforestation and impacting women's rights in forest communities. I'm far over my time, but I just continue until you say stop. So indigenous communities in the Global South, and with women who are on the front lines of these fights. Even the projects which are trying to do good, like the RED Plus projects on reforestation, we have shown that bringing money into these forest communities have pushed the women out of the decision making and off their lands. It has led to land grabbing and increased inequality for these women. So we need really to bring gender justice at the core of our climate actions. So we need gender just climate finance, gender just climate policies, and that is not all. We also need to address, of course, the other areas where we have a lot of spending, and that is the military. And of course, it's very much linked with the nuclear industry. And I understand in Scotland you still have nuclear industry, and it's very expensive and very slow. It makes absolutely no sense for the climate transition. It's really there to support the military complex. And that we have to say very clearly. That is where we also need to make sure that we bring peace and not conflict. And we're looking forward to working with you, because I think what you have done, the Women's Budget Organization, and when on the Feminist Green Deal for the UK, is an amazing example. And we want to work with you and make sure that this is a global movement and that we can all follow your footsteps and learn from your reports. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go, Sasha.
Okay, so now we're going to have a discussion among the panel before we open it to the floor. And I just want to thank you, not just for your immaculate timekeeping, but for really inspiring comments and visionary comments. You've all set up a kind of future that I think we would all want to sign up to, a radically different culture in which women's lives and everyone's lives would be so different. Now I want to depress everyone a little. We're at COP26, and there are those discussions going on over there in the event campus. And how do we make any connection between what you've been talking about here and what they're discussing and doing there? How do we begin to engage beyond having our vision of how it should be? Which poor victim is going to kick us off here to say what is needed? How can we push for this? Kavita,
Everyone's looking at me.
Yeah, I am looking at you.
Well, speaking on behalf of what the Women and Gender Constituency has done over the years is really push for the Gender Action Plan and the Enhanced Lima Work Program on gender. And over the years...
This is at the UNFCCC.
Yeah, yep. Sorry. Yes, so within the climate change policies that have been developing, UNFCCC, and then Kyoto Protocol, and now the Paris Agreement, we've had the Gender Action Plan that came in quite late. But still, it's developing, it's progressing. In fact, a number of negotiations were happening just this week about this, where we're trying to get the wordings right to make sure that it is centered on women's human rights, and it is about meaningful participation of women at every level of the UNFCCC processes. And so a number of our feminist sisters who are in that space over there have been working tirelessly in really lobbying around what GAP is, what it means for the effectiveness of international climate action, and that gender cannot be left behind when all these negotiations are going. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about finance, whether we're talking about technology, if we're talking about adaptation, whatever it is, whatever conversations that are, or negotiations that are being held must center gender.
But Kavita, can I ask you, what kind of force, will that be enforceable, or is this just people signing up to it to show they're the good guys?
To be quite honest, there's nothing that's enforceable right now. These are really just implementation frameworks that are largely based around the voluntary pledges and commitments that parties that have signed on to this or are negotiating right now commit to do. And so the way it works is there's a draft text. We're asked for advice on how do we strengthen this, or if there's something that shouldn't be there. And those of us in the Women and Gender Constituency, including a lot of our allies and partners in different constituencies and so forth, we work together to make sure that the language that's actually being negotiated and talked among the parties is actually the right language we need to at least push for policies that would progress and uplift women's meaningful participation, and what all the activities, and making sure that there is budget and resources that would be put. It's not just empty promises about adding the word gender mainstreaming and sort of just pink washing those. It's a lot more than that. So there's a lot of advocacy and campaigning, and the Women and Gender Constituency every year comes up with a set of key demands that really informs a lot of the negotiations about what feminist demands must look like. And a lot of that is aligned with the principles that are established by the Feminist Green New Deals, both from the US and the UK, and around the Global South, where we don't necessarily call it the Feminist Green New Deal.
but as you know, in Asia Pacific, we've got the Feminist Fossil Fuel Free Future, and there are a number of frameworks. But all our principles are very much aligned to what we're seeking, and I think that's perhaps our most significant contribution to this negotiation.
And how is that impacted by the fact that women are in such a minority on almost every single UNFCCC committee, and that the numbers seem to have been going down since the last COP? It's shocking.
Look, we need to recognize that the UN, the structure, the institutions, the policies, they are all patriarchal colonial structures. And so everything that's come out of it is rather patriarchal colonial, and including very white supremacist. I mean, on Monday I was sitting in a panel with 4 female leaders from Bangladesh, Estonia, Tanzania and Scotland. And these are female prime ministers and presidents who actually shared how difficult it is for them to be in a space where they have 140 leaders or something and 10 of them are women. So from that level to the grassroots, which is where, you know, where we're trying to amplify their voices, it is extremely challenging. But it also means that we just push harder and not give up. Because if we're not there to actually, you know, make ourselves visible, then this would be a more depressing situation than it already is. But the fact that we're all here, and despite the challenges of COVID and whatnot, women, grassroots women, have traveled from all over the world. And whether it's being picked up by the negotiations or not, a lot of work is being done between the movements. There is a lot of solidarity. We are connecting with each other. And together, at the grassroots level, we are shifting people's attitudes. There is, I don't think anywhere in the world we can say nobody knows about climate change, and nobody knows about, you know, what women are doing, what youths are doing, what indigenous women are doing. It's everywhere. So there has been, I think we just need to think separately from, we've got these really dystopian, disconnected legal policy technicalities, thousands of acronyms. God knows how anyone can keep up with, you know, 500 different technical working groups. And then you've got outside of those processes, those of us who can barely get in and speak, but the work that we're doing on the outside. And that's the stuff that makes the difference.
Interesting. Sasha, do you want to come in there? Do you want to come in there and respond, and or talk about other ways in which we can bridge this gap?
Yeah. Well, I must say that we do have a lot of support from now the young feminists, and I'm super happy with that. And I'm really sorry that our colleague is not here from Fridays for Futures. But I think the pushing from the outside, the Gretas of this world, are really important to support our movements. And so we need you there, and we need you to be very loud, and that is really having an immense impact, because of course we are facing on the other side billions of money going in the wrong direction. And so what we have is our voices and our demonstrations. And so that's also a good thing. We managed to do demonstrations inside the official meetings. Yesterday we had an amazing feminist demonstration, and we had everybody join us. And even small things like handing out masks with feminist climate justice to the lead negotiators so that they will wear them during the negotiations is also helping to shift the mindsets. And the data also helps. That the Secretary puts out a study and says, okay, we've had some increase and then a bit of a decrease of women in the delegations. But what we find really shocking is that despite that, the men are still capturing the voice space. 74% of the time used for speaking is used by the male delegates, for example, right? So it helps also to understand that if we want an ecofeminist world, we all have to share these spaces, and we need to increase the spaces, and it is happening. So it is happening. We see more and more delegations where they are bringing in gender parity, where they're bringing in young people, where they're bringing in diverse voices. So, and then we need, of course, to create the legally binding frameworks. And they have to happen in our countries. And they have to happen at the EU level. So, indeed, if the EU is now negotiating an agreement to stop the imports of products which are leading to deforestation, it might sound boring, but it's super important. It's much more important than the 14 billion which were pledged here the day before for deforestation. That is really how we're going to change our consumption and production patterns. And indeed, it also means less meat, less soy imports, more local healthy products which you produce yourselves. So it also means for us a change, of course, and taking a responsibility for the future generations. And I think we were not helped by the fact that, and I don't have the figures in mind, but there was a lot of money going from the Koch brothers and other conservative groups into anti-climate advertisements. Yeah? So we've had, of course, our voices have been silenced by very expensive media campaigns to try and say that what we say is ridiculous and these ecofeminists are terrible, but our voices have grown louder, and I think that is what we now need to do. We also need to make sure that we legalize all these crazy spendings on false climate news, and how we do that. It's by voting, getting the right people in office, making sure we get better laws, protect your, Joe Cox, it's so sad that just with hatred in the media you are able to kill your best politicians on the streets. There is a long way still to go, but I think many people have now, are working on these changes in the policies and the legal systems. And we should not give up the hope, because the young feminists, men and boys and girls are all there to support them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Sherilyn, do you want to come in there?
I don't think I can add to those two amazing sets of insights. I think that, definitely solidarity amongst the different constituency groups and the various different movements all around the world is the key to driving forward this. It's not just a feminist agenda, it's shared by so many other movements.
Because the dangers of just seeing gender in isolation and not having an intersectional approach. ZARINA, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of things that I can add to that. So yeah, building on the solidarity, I think even when we live in the West, is recognizing the solidarity with other parts of the world. And that's not just by saying that, all right, we're going to put money into another country, but actually recognizing and value the people of this country that have those connections with other parts of the world. So even looking in this room, we are probably connected to 50 countries in itself, right? So why is that not recognized? Why is that not valued? For me, we've got solidarity right now, right here, with other parts of the world, but it's not valued in any way. We've got people in this room that have got voices, that have got opinions, but again, it's not valued. It's putting that value. Where do we put that value? Who holds that power? It's let's change those dynamics. Let's change that positionality is really important for me. And once you're in that position, is then open the door for others. Don't shut it behind you. And that's really important about solidarity, is push the door open and keep it wide open for others to step in. So that's what I would say.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's really nice.
Do any of you want to add to that before we open it up to the floor? So over to you, either here in person or online. Do you want to ask questions, make comments, react? What do you want to say? We've got one question here. You'll be brought a mic there. Thank you. I'll start with you.
First of all, I just want to say a big, big thank you to you ladies up there and to everyone sitting down here. I mean, it's just so beautiful to have people who can sit up there and just speak for the rest of us. And I want to especially recognize what you've just said, saying that before you go out there, you have the people right here in this country. You can link to the country out there, first recognizing those who are in here. We have a lot of people who have left their countries to come into the UK. For them to even be able to manage to cross these borders and be here, there is some sort of fire burning in them. However, they're in a place where they can't let that fire out. So they are here. If you recognize them, they know there are people better than you do. When you recognize them, they will link you to them and they will tell you in the voice of their people, this is what they can offer, this is what they want, this is what they need. Now, back to women in general. I also like what you said about trying to bridge that gap where you've got people at the top, the women at the top, they're also struggling. They feel like, oh, we've got like thousands of people sitting here and we only have 10 women. Now, for me, I just believe that we have a lot of women who, they have this, like this, they're educated, they have a lot in them, but there are other little barriers. Because I was part of this group called the Lancashire Women, and in there, I met a lot of other women, and one of them said she does radiology and all of that, and I thought, wow. And every time we tried to speak, she appeared shy. And that's just because she goes, my English no good, my English no good. And that broke me, because she had a lot in her, but the English became a barrier. So I just feel like this is a great opportunity to break those barriers. We have a lot of powerful women sat in our midst, but because there's a language barrier, there's one other barrier whatsoever that is there, but it's not helping them to shine that light out there. I just feel like whatever we can do to push, and close that gap, it is doable. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I?
Thank you.
Anna, can I just
And
say
we're going to do it,
something?
right?
Right. So on that note, I just really want to acknowledge somebody in this room as well. So we have Susie sitting over there. Susie's from El Salvador. She's a wonderful person who's done all the plastic jewelry. She's made out of recycled plastic. But Susie has been so shy because of her language, right?
Oh.
She's only been in the country for 2 years, and she's moved. She spoke no English when she came here, and now she speaks a little bit of English, but Susie is still shy. But please go over and talk to her.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hola.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Thanks.
Other questions or comments from the floor? Yeah. Okay, we've got one in the middle there and then one at the end there. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you all for some really wonderful insights. I've really enjoyed the panel. I wanted to speak in particular to something that KAVITA mentioned, which was the fact that the United Nations Forum that's going on currently is an institution that's inherently, I think you said, patriarchal, neocolonial, and yeah.
Sexist.
Perpetuating neoliberal capitalism, all the bad things. So I just wanted to ask you how you found, or how you married trying to campaign for a different system, an alternative system outside of the UNFCCC, while simultaneously trying to work within those structures to change things from the inside, whether you saw like a conflict between those two goals. Because yeah, this is something that I'm experiencing myself. I'm a youth delegate with the UK Youth Climate Coalition, and we're also trying to campaign on the inside, while also accepting that it's a bit of a broken system and trying to develop a better system from the outside. So any insights on this would be much welcome. Thank you.
If it makes you feel any better, there is really no right answer. We're all trying to find ways of really trying to understand this deliberately convoluted system and then align it to the realities of our world and what we're fighting for. So for me, it's quite simple, because I fight for feminist climate justice, and I know what issues, pretty much every one of them, is very relevant to the work that I do. It helps for me because I'm privileged enough to be an international human rights lawyer, so I'm able to digest these documents none of it is easy, even for somebody with my training. And keeping in mind that I work with grassroots women in Asia and Pacific, where English is not necessarily their first language as well, how do I then ensure, working with many allies and many, many feminists who are doing this work with me, is how do we unpack what's happening there and bring it down to the grassroots level, and then make sure that what's happening at the grassroots level is transferred right back to the halls of power, so that they don't operate in isolation and keep pushing false technocratic bullshit down our throats. And we do that by really being in these spaces. Believe me, none of us are enjoying being in this space. It is overwhelmingly exhausting. It is discriminatory. Civil society is treated like shit. And we're still in here because we are privileged enough to be here to speak on behalf of those who aren't here. And our action last night was to recognize missing voices of all the Global South women who should be here and they're not because of racist immigration policies and vaccine apartheid. And for all our sisters who have lost their lives fighting for their lands, their resources, their very livelihoods. And that number is increasing every year. That's the thing that really, really motivates us to do this, despite how much we detest all of it. But we are here because we are going to use whatever that's happening in those halls to hold our governments accountable. We are going to hold them accountable when we go back home. So it doesn't, for me, it's the Pacific. For those in Latin America, for those in Africa, for those in Middle East, hold them accountable to what they're promising here. Because they come up here and they make lots of promises. But when they go back home, they don't do much. And that's where we come in. And so every year we come in here and we push back. Whether they want to hear us or not, we make sure they hear us. And as youth, you've got far more energy than I do. So you're going to be in this much longer, and really use that system. Know your enemy. Know that these policies are just one way to lobby, to campaign, to be an advocate. It's just one way. Use it as a tool. But really, like I said, I'm a huge believer of, speaking truth to power, and power belongs to the people. So you use what you learn and bring it right back to where you are able to have the power to make the shift and changes you need, whether it's through making informed political choices, or whether it's, chaining yourself to the bridge, whatever it takes. I believe every single human being has the capacity to do something for themselves, but those of us with power and privilege needs to do more. We need to do more, and that's why we're here. Sorry, that was a long one.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kavita. So we'll have the question, and then we'll see if we've got any questions through the chat.
Make sure the question is for those three.
So I'm Claire Duncanson. I'm from the Consortium on Gender, Security and Human Rights. And we've been working on feminist Green New Deal ideas as well, really kind of sharing the analysis that you've shared from the platform, really aware of the way in which Green New Deals without a feminist approach don't pay enough attention to care, as you've said. They totally neglect that analysis of militarism, as you've said. They really fail to grasp the way that we need so much more than a transition to clean energy. Clean energy doesn't look so clean when you're taking a global southern perspective and considering the amount of mining and e-waste and so on and so forth. But something that we're often quizzed about is whether we should be so critical about a set of policies that, if enacted, would still have us on a much better path than we're currently on. So I kind of wanted to ask the panel, what's your response when you're asked, feminists are too critical, you're pushing too much, the Green New Deal would be better than we are just now, so can't you just wait and voice your critical concerns later?
Isn't it interesting that women are always being asked to wait? I wonder why.
I don't get asked that. I'm an academic. I'm told I'm not critical enough half the time. So I don't have. I have a luxury position of not having to
take it away, Sasha.
to policymakers.
So the answer is we need to be critical. The Green Deal can easily become a greenwashing deal. And that's why we all need to be very critical, and we need to make sure that human rights and gender justice are at the center of this new deal. And it's like in the Netherlands. Yeah, I come from the Netherlands. Wonderful. We have a new green policy. We give subsidies to people who buy Tesla cars for 80,000 euros or so. We don't give that money to low-income women households who are struggling with 5 kids and trying to get, have much more mobility challenges than the billionaire who has his Tesla. So it's so unjust. And there is no questioning about these type of policies because it's all behind the mind that it should bring back the money and that it should be profitable. So you're giving a subsidy to Tesla, but it will create lots and lots and lots of money. The understanding that the real value in our society is created by unpaid care work of women is completely lacking. And so I think we have to be critical. Keep up the job.
ZARINA, do you want to say anything? Do you want to respond to that?
I think.
Claire, you know this, but of course the Women's Budget Group has done research to show that investing in care would create 2.7 times as many jobs and produce 30% less greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a kind of, there is a hard case for why these policies should be adopted and should be embedded within Green New Deal strategies and just transition strategies. So there's lots of, I think there are some, and there's a really good sort of infographic that your organization, the Consortium on Gender Security and Human Rights has just put out. So look for the tweets for some really good, helpful infographics that you can use to make the arguments when you're asked these questions.
Do you want to say anything? Do you want to add to that?
The only thing I'd like to say is probably that I sometimes think we're not being critical enough, like not being radical enough. When I say critical enough, I even sometimes feel the feminist Green New Deal is actually not tackling capitalism, and there's still a part of that that's still feeding into the same systems. And I know we have to take steps slowly and be in the inside and the outside to make the changes. But sometimes I just feel like we need a bomb. Sorry, wrong word to use here. But we need to have something a lot more stronger that would actually just turn things around, flip it around, and just so that we do put things like care and nurturing and the things that women do so well at the heart and the center of all policies, and not money, not profit.
I would also add that if you don't include gender, you are excluding gender and excluding people. So we need to challenge that idea that there's a neutral position. It isn't neutral at all. But have we had any questions from online?
Hi, yeah, we've had a few. They're all quite long, so we should probably do one at a time.
Right.
We've had a question from someone who's doing their politics dissertation on climate change and gender equalities, focusing on the Scottish energy sector. And she's asking, how can we encourage more women into educational pathways that lead to the more traditionally masculine job roles, such as engineering, geology, etc.?
So the kind of STEM area that has been traditionally male. Anybody want to?
Yeah, sure, we can start. I mean, we are working, for example, in Uganda and Morocco and Georgia with young and older women on developing solar solutions. And so often they say, well, we can't do that because only the boys know how to do welding. They know how to hold the welder, and we have never learned that from our dads, right? So it doesn't even start in school, it already starts in the families. And, but it's really not such a barrier. You organize welding courses, and you know, and it doesn't have to be a 4-year engineering study. You should start with things like this, and I think it should be part of our educational system that all our, kids in school should learn how to make their solar water heaters, and shouldn't be. And then I think it will be much easier to motivate more girls also to go into STEM courses. Hopefully. Let's try.
Thank you. Any other questions from online? And then we'll come.
Yeah.
We'll just have one more and then we'll come to you.
Great, thanks. We've got one here from Ruthie who says, as a stay-at-home mum, I have very little actual power. I wonder whether you have any advice as to how I might contribute positively to the conversations and make a difference.
Anyone want to pick that
Yeah.
one up?
So there's lots that happen in your community, in your local community. There's lots of like other groups that you can join. But also, I mean, we live in a digital world now. So there's so much happening on the digital platform. So you just need to go onto that platform, look at what's happening, either whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on TikTok. But there is an abundance of news, education resources, forums, campaigns, petitions that you can join. So just being at home doesn't give you an excuse not to get involved.
Thank you.
May I?
Thank you. Yeah?
Griffey, think about what you like doing. Like I said, you don't need to be a lawyer, an activist, a scientist. I really believe that, and I can see this with the youth movements and my 90-year-old Nana, who can now speak about climate change to me because I've burnt her ears off. You just, you can write, you can speak, you can meet people, talk about it, you can talk to your own family about it. That's just a start. And you'd be surprised how that start leads to real changes from your family, relatives, and friends to the community. And that's what we need. What we really need is people to start shifting their attitude and not convince themselves the problem is too big. It's just me. What am I going to do? I feel really bad for everybody, but I'm okay. So I'm just going to feel a little bit guilty, but or use plastic straws. Paper straws or whatever, and that's going to be enough. No, there is a little bit more you can do. So challenge yourself. I believe in you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, here we've got a question. Sorry, is that
STEM?
working?
Women in STEM.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not in STEM myself. I'm not clever enough for that. But a good friend of mine is, and she found it really difficult, even getting to the point of getting that, grad scheme, and she's in there. And she now is no longer in the grad scheme because in that there was 2 women in the grad scheme with her. Everyone else was a man. There was no women higher up than her. All heteronormative men, white men. There was just no diversity at all, and it was so ingrained. It was, shake hands for all the men, and high love to her, and there's tiny things. So yeah, she had a place there. Yeah, 2 women had a place there, but the microaggressions are just unstoppable. And I think that's, not to sound really depressing, such a lovely, inspiring thing, but I think personally that's where I'm at as someone who works in hospitality. Microaggressions for men. I can't disconnect gender-based violence with the climate crisis. I think they're so interconnected, and I think the microaggressions that surround each are inherent to this same fact that kind of you're just allowed to do whatever you want to the world, body autonomy, there's like none of it, and that's just kind of what's going on in these kind of male-dominated discussions. But I don't know, that was a really depressing way. It was just to say in the back of it that it's not just getting into it. Once you're there, it's
so
still up.
Should we have quota or so? Should we have like specific support so that more girls sign up and join STEM courses? Or?
Once you've signed up though, I think, because I had a conversation with her and she's saying, do I give up my life so I'm the one woman at the head who can help out maybe 1 or 2 other women who managed to make it that far? Do I give up my life just to do that? And I think that's maybe the difficulty. It's no longer about quota. It's no longer about getting women in. It's about educating men and other people who need to be. And I think that's where I love that push and I love that drive. But I do also think that there comes a point where you can no longer yell at the person with their foot in your neck to say get off, like they need to lift. And I think that's the only thing that here tonight I don't think maybe was touched on enough, is how that change actually comes from the person who's not doing it. Like, it's all coming from us, and it needs to come from them a bit more. The us and them, I don't know who they are really, but you know what I mean. I think, I don't know, it's...
Very good. No, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've made a very important point. We just take one other question and then we'll... Oh gosh, there's so many hands up now. Yes, you there. I don't know that we're going to have time to answer all of them here now, but we will be able to have some discussions afterwards. Yeah.
Can we please go to the lady that's sitting next to you, please, because she put her hand up for quite some time.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't notice that. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, Kavita.
So just the second person to your right.
Well, one of you...
It's okay, and then we'll take your question as well.
Yeah.
Please, it's just that I know you've been putting your hand up for quite some time.
Sorry, I didn't see you there behind someone.
That's okay, thank you. So I work at a climate planning consultancy, and we work with a lot of cities and local governments, municipalities basically, and I was wondering if the panelists could comment a little bit on how they think feminist climate action can translate down to the local level, both for community groups, but also for local levels of government. You know, what are the key things they need to be thinking about in terms of what they have control over? I believe SASCHA mentioned renewable energy cooperatives as part of a feminist solution, so I was really curious about that as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll just have this other question, then you can respond. So if you want to hand the mic back to... Oh, you've got one, yeah.
Hi, thank you, everyone. First, I will just commend all the ladies for what you've done and how you've broken the barriers, and that's really important to me, and it's a joy that we can all see that to hear how far you've come, and that is really important as well. So I was just a few points out when you were talking, and what really struck me was the 5 hours.
The 5 hours.
And the 5 Fs that you spoke about. But for me, I will just summarize everything in my own words and say that we've come a long way as women, especially women of color, I would say. And, you know, for us to be here, because of our culture sometimes, you know, we are more of women that will sit at home and you know, the fathers or the husbands will go and they will tell you where you should be, no matter what the degree is. Is the kitchen the main one that you should cook for them when they come? But for a few years now, you know, we've seen our women coming out, you know, to lend their voice. For example, this is a lady here, and she's a director of SWAN, and you know, it's really important to me, and it gives me joy, especially when we had the Scottish, you know, the ladies came over, was it 3 weeks ago, and you show the video again, how we were all relating together, you know, bringing voices together, and that is one thing that I think, well, these people, the government, are losing if they can't hear us. Because it's high time they actually, this glass ceiling thing that it's all in the profession, it's high time they just break it and restructure the traditional practices that, you know, everyone keep thinking that women can do it. I live in Warrington, and I was speaking to a Muslim lady last night before traveling here this morning. She did a PhD, and you wouldn't even know that she's a PhD holder. And what struck me was she works in the University of Manchester now. She's doing a postdoc with the chemical engineering department. She is very, very intelligent the way she was speaking. But before she could get the job 3 months ago, she read and read, and she went for the interview. And they told her that she couldn't get the position she needed because of technical, whatever, I don't know. But they brought in a man that didn't even have any degree. And, you know, she fought her way out, but, you know, for her lending her voice and telling me that she is strong enough to do it, it's something that I really applaud. So for me, I just always say that integration is the key, as we should actually stand for what we represent and try to integrate as much as we can, as we are all here from different aspects or different walks of life. So well done to you, everyone, for breaking the barriers, and we will keep breaking it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yoo-hoo! Thank you. That was a wonderful contribution to end on. Thank you. It's very nice to hear the word joy in a conversation like this. I'm going to ask the panel to literally have 1 or 2 sentences to either respond to these last 2 comments or to make a comment of your own, starting with you, Sasha.
I'll just respond to the local level question, not local, the local municipality question. I think it's really great. You need to set targets. And renewable energy cooperatives don't automatically have women leadership. You need to organize around it. You need to have feminist organization, and you need to say, this is what we want. This is the future. These are the new jobs. Why are, you know, there are no women there? And discuss with the municipalities and make sure that you make an extra effort to bring in women as managers, as leaders, as technicians, at all levels, and it's a big challenge.
Thank you.
Because we still have very few women in renewable energy.
Thank
but you can do it.
Thank you. Zarina.
I would say about something that KAVITA said earlier on, which I totally agree with, is meaningful participation consultations. So there's a lot of consultations that happen, but none of our voices get heard. So it's about how do we get more meaningful participation in these consultations and decision making. And if you've got a voice and you've got a place and you've got privilege, use that.
Thank you. SHERILYN.
I was particularly moved by your comments about your experiences in STEM or whatever your field is. But I think the thing that you were highlighting is that we need to spend as much time thinking about masculinities and forms of masculinity and as we do talking about the feminization of a lot of the issues that we've talked about tonight. So for me, I think that we need to remember that gender is not synonymous with women, and that we need to think about men and men's roles in the progressive movements for climate justice.
Thank you. And KAVITA.
I work with grassroots women in very remote parts of Asia and the Pacific. And through feminist participatory action research, we really build their capacities. These women most of them don't speak English, they don't know how to read or write. And the methodology we use and how we mobilize these women, and it's within their power, these women, the success we've seen, and please go and look at these stories on the APWLD website. These women at the grassroots level have gone on to join their local councils, the panchayats, starting from the very small levels and going all the way to become MPs in their parliament. So I think if grassroots women with those beginnings can have the courage to really challenge patriarchy in their communities and go to that level of female leadership, I think most of us here, are far ahead. So there's no excuses to how we can mobilize as feminists and do what needs to be done.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make one comment to the question about the local communities. I know that the Women's Budget Group has run a couple of events recently, and I think they've been recorded, that full of really exciting and interesting initiatives about that way of approaching the climate crisis. So I just want to really end by saying, I mean, I am one of those, I'm afraid to admit, who often gets a little overwhelmed by pessimism and, oh, it's all too big. And what I've found so invigorating about this evening is it's really countered that. Both the panel and your comments from the floor have really stressed how there are so many different ways that we can exert pressure. And they don't all have to be on the global level. And we have to just keep exerting that pressure, because that pressure eventually does push through. And so I think it's actually, curiously, I'm surprised, I'm such a pessimist. This is a very optimistic message, I think, that comes from this event. And I would like you to join with me in thanking this inspiring panel and all of you for participating. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you, Madam
Oh, and
Chair.
please,
Thank you.
food, drink, the exhibition, stay, talk, network. We'll all be here.